Today, the beverage aisle looks a lot different than it used to. America's beverage companies are working together. We're delivering the options everyone wants. In fact, nearly 60% of beverages Americans buy have zero sugar. You'll find more variety than ever, including more of your favorites, now available with zero sugar. You'll also find more sizes and clear calorie information on the front of every can, bottle, and pack. We know when it comes to finding balance, the more choices, the better.
Population boom continues. Census data out today shows almost 20,000 people have moved to Wayne County in the last...
I live in the Triangle. It's a rapidly growing metropolis in central North Carolina. And that growth is fueling a building boom.
In fact, you can see this long row of newly built homes, and there are also lots for new homes.
If you drive through the suburban sprawl of cities like Raleigh or Durham, you'll see dozens of subdivisions, each with rows of boxy new homes. Sometimes the same home, over and over and over. And at times, it can feel like you don't really live anywhere at all.
Yes, you could buy the same house in Mandio, North Carolina, the same shape, design, colors, roof shape, that you can buy in Montana. And so people have lost the notion that a house belongs to its particular place.
I'm Anissa Khalifa. This is The Broadside, where we tell stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. This week, we ask a simple question with a not-so-simple answer. What exactly is a Southern home? Hey, y'all. Before we continue with the episode, we need to make an ask. WUNC, which makes The Broadside, is a public radio station that relies on listener support to bring you the stories you listen to each and every week. Listener support pays for the microphone I'm talking to you on, and the audio software that lets us put this plucky music under my voice. And right now, we need your support more than ever. Please make a contribution in any amount that you're able to at WUNC.org/donate. Your support will make sure that we're able to keep bringing you these stories from our home at the crossroads of the South. Thank you so much. What do you think makes a Southern home?
Boy, that's hard to pigeonhole.
This is friend of the podcast, Jeremy Markovich. He writes the North Carolina Rabbit Hole newsletter, where he explores the quirky and often baffling culture of my home state.
I feel like I lived in a very Southern home when I lived in Charlotte, and it was a one-story house built in the 60s, and it had an attic fan. And I was like, oh, that's so cool, because this house predated air conditioning, and we had air conditioning when we lived there, but somebody was telling me, oh no, this house was designed to have an attic fan, and you open all the windows and you turn on the fan, and then it pulls all the air through the house and it circulates it, and that's how you cool your house. And I was like, wow, that's amazing.
As you can hear, Jeremy gets excited about the tiniest details. So, when we started working on an episode about the things that make up a quintessential Southern home, we knew he would have some stories.
And one day I was like, I should turn on the attic fan. I don't know if it's ever been turned on in 30 years or something like that. Like, this is going to be some moment. I won't need air conditioning anymore. It's going to be bliss. And I turned it on. It was so loud and rattling, and I was like, it's going to burn my house down. I need to turn it right back off. And I never did it again.
Now, Jeremy clearly has stories about attics, but I wanted to get to the heart of what makes a Southern home. The foundation, if you will. And in the South, that lowest level of a house is defined by what it doesn't have. A basement. Jeremy is a big fan of the subterranean room. When I asked him what his favorite basement was, he didn't miss a beat.
It's the Wayne's World basement.
Yes! Oh my gosh.
It's the Wayne's World basement.
I love that.
Party time! Excellent! Party on, Wayne! Party on, Garth. It's Wayne's World!
Because it's got the wood paneling. It's got two dudes down here who are just messing around because, like, I feel like nothing serious happens in a basement.
Totally.
If you wanted to do something that was important, that you wanted people to see, that was an activity that was pristine, and you would invite people over to your house, you would do that upstairs, right?
And this has considerable cultural implications. For Southerners, all of our embarrassing hobbies, our treadmills, our Christmas decorations, they go elsewhere. And because of that, Jeremy says we also miss out on some majorly quirky architectural features.
Have you heard of the Pittsburgh toilet?
I have not heard of the Pittsburgh toilet.
Okay, I will describe it to you, but you have to Google it for full effect.
Okay.
It's fine. You can do it at work. It's fine. The Pittsburgh toilet is a toilet in a basement that has nothing around it. It's not in a bathroom. In fact, in a lot of cases, the toilet is just sitting in the middle of the basement with nothing around it. And so then you say, well, who uses the Pittsburgh toilet? Like, in the middle of the basement.
What do you need with this, freestanding toilet with no privacy?
Yeah, with no privacy at all. And the answer is actually it's a plumbing thing. It's the lowest part of the house, so like when the water goes out, if it backs up, it keeps it from backing up. It's kind of like a backflow preventer in a lot of ways.
So right about now, you're probably wondering, why does this man know so much about basements? Well, about a year ago, Jeremy went down a rabbit hole while writing a piece called, Why Don't Southern Homes Have Basements? But when he started his research, he didn't actually know if that was true.
So I thought to myself, this is such an anecdotal thing that everybody seems to know that Southern homes don't have basements. And I figured there's got to be some kind of academic study that has looked into this trend, right? Like it feels, like an architecture thing, but also kind of cultural, right? Like what is going on here? I could not find any. And then I called up the folks at, the NC State School of Design and were like, can somebody talk to me about this that's like looked into it? And they were like, nobody's looked into this. And so I was like, well, how do you take it from sort of like, I feel this is right? Like there's, anecdotally, this feels like it's valid, but is it just me or am I not seeing it? And the one place that you can actually look it up is the U.S. Census. So the U.S. Census keeps track of population, but they also keep track of all sorts of other things about people and how they live and where they live. And they track the percentage of new homes with basements. They have tracked this since 1971.
Huh.
So you can look this up, and they do it by region.
Sure enough, in the Northeast and the Midwest, the vast majority of new single-family homes have basements.
Then you have the South and the West. And the South and the West are very low. In fact, if you look at the West, maybe about 20% have basements. And the South, it has steadily declined to like maybe 5% or less. Actually, there used to be more and it's gone down. And the reason why is fairly straightforward. Like it makes sense in that it's cold up north and it's not quite as cold down here. So when the ground freezes, it freezes to a deeper degree than it does in the South. So in order to build a house, to build a foundation that you don't want to just crack because the ground is heaving and going up and down because it's getting frozen and unfrozen, you have to dig below the frost line, and the frost line is just deeper in the north. So if you're going to go ahead and dig in the north a couple of feet maybe down, then why not just keep digging a couple more feet and build yourself a basement, right? Like actually get some use out of this thing. In the South, that's not actually necessary. You don't have to go down 6 feet, 5 feet, whatever. You could just go down 1 foot, maybe 2 feet, and then you get the same effect.
Because of that, in much of the South, especially in older homes, you see crawl spaces with a dirt floor filled with mold and dead animals. Stuff of nightmares. But building technology has improved a lot in recent years, limiting some of the fears around freezing. So increasingly, folks just dig a foot down and fill it with concrete.
Because slabs are really cheap. In fact, that is the biggest thing. And the other factor is scale. So if you're a modern home builder, excavating costs a lot of money. And so if you're building a house and you're a builder and you want to make as much profit off of it as you possibly can, but you want to keep the cost as low as you possibly can, you're going to opt for a slab.
And that has led to a fascinating development nationwide. As a proportion of overall homes, the basement, along with its scary southern cousin, the crawl space, is rapidly declining. And it's basically all our fault.
The one thing that's actually dragging the whole basement industrial complex down is the fact that, like, a ton of homes are being built in the South. Like, so many people are moving to the South. So many homes are being built in the South. In fact, more than half of all of the new single-family homes being built in the United States in 2022 were built in the South. So,
wow.
Since none of those homes have basements, or I should say hardly any of those homes have basements, it kind of drags down the whole basement thing across the country. If you don't like sump pumps, if you hate sump pumps, then come to the South. We got more slabs than The Undertaker.
But the building boom that's killing off the basement and the crawl space is also threatening other elements of regional home building. Mass production and cookie-cutter design means that you can't just look at a house and tell where it lives anymore. Coming up after a break, we chat with someone who can explain what we're missing out on and how we can reclaim a little bit of our sense of place.
Good morning.
Hi, come on in.
I'm Anissa.
Oh, hi, I'm Frank.
Architect Frank Harmon knows homes, especially Southern homes.
Well, you know, Southern architecture is a huge experience.
While he's worked on projects around the world, Frank spent most of his illustrious career in Raleigh, North Carolina.
You know, I've designed houses for clients for over 40 years.
And because of that, I recently showed up on his doorstep to ask the big question. What makes a Southern home?
A real Southern house belongs to its place. Wherever I build, I've always tried to pay attention to the place. I start with that.
Frank has carried this deep sense of place throughout his work, and he's been thinking about the way architecture fits into its environment since he was a kid.
I looked out the window in the 8th grade in Greensboro, North Carolina. It was an English class. Miss Dickinson was my teacher. I saw a really interesting building across the street, and it was the first time I had ever thought to myself, that interesting building had to have somebody who thought about it before it was built. And I got very interested. Yeah. By the way, Mrs. Dickinson threw a piece of chalk at me because I was looking out the window. Yeah. In the mornings at this time of year, over next to that wall is good because it's sheltered from the wind.
I got a tour of Frank's home, which he designed 35 years ago, on a lovely spring morning.
Yeah, it's a small suburban lot. And as you can see, we built a house over here underneath these oak trees.
The sun was shining just right on the beautiful building and the garden that surrounds it. The lot is embedded in a bustling neighborhood next to NC State University, in the heart of Raleigh. But you wouldn't know it standing in Frank's yard.
Our home is our oasis. It's our one private place that we feel totally comfortable, and it belongs to us.
That's so true. Yeah, like a sanctuary almost.
Yeah, a sanctuary. I like that.
On the outside, the house has a quintessential modernist look. It's a rectangular structure with a flat roof and is lined with tall windows, some reaching from the floor to the ceiling. But Frank says there's a lot more to this design than meets the eye.
It doesn't look like a typical Southern house, but it's actually built like a Southern house. A characteristic of a good Southern house is that it has deciduous trees on the south side. These are trees that lose their leaves in the winter so the sun can warm the house, but in the summer the leaves shade the house. So on the south side of this house are 3 75-year-old oak trees.
Then there are the windows. Each room has windows on at least 2 sides.
That means you can open the windows on 2 sides and get natural ventilation. It also means that you have very good daylight so that you can see each other clearly.
And running through the house is a central hallway designed for yet more airflow, with rooms lining the corridor.
That's a plan that has been repeated countless times in little farmhouses, plantation houses, and homes in cities for 200 years. So, although our house looks very modern, it's made of steel and concrete, and it has big windows, it's built on traditional Southern principles.
Those Southern design principles, in many ways, are driven by our hot climate. And that leads us to the one element that immediately comes to mind when I think of a Southern home.
It usually has a porch.
The Southern staple you can see from New Orleans to Norfolk. But where exactly did the porch come from? Frank says most of the homes of wealthy white families in the 1700s and 1800s did not have grand porches.
Most of the early buildings in the South were built on English precedents. They're often made of brick. They have big windows. They don't necessarily pay attention to where they are. But if you look at the enslaved people's cabins, they were usually made of wood, which is a much more satisfactory material to build with in the South. And they usually had porches.
The porch was often positioned on the south side of the cabin, helping enslaved people keep cool during the summertime.
But that would allow the sun to come in and warm the house in the winter. So ironically, the slave owners were in their brick mansions suffering from the heat because brick is going to absorb the heat during the day and radiate it into the house at night so you can't sleep.
And then there's perhaps the most famous design feature of pre-Civil War architecture.
Two-story white painted houses with columns. That's mostly a fantasy in our imagination.
A few big estates featured those ornate Greek Revival-style columns. But for the most part, phony, says Frank. In reality, most antebellum architecture was Victorian in style.
With lots of ornament, many colors of paint, and tall windows, very unlike what people think of now as antebellum architecture.
And unlike what we see in movies like Gone with the Wind. But when it came to Southern authenticity in 1930s Hollywood...
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
In the post-Reconstruction era, these Corinthian columns became another myth of the Old South. That before the Civil War, this was the, quote, proper look for a wealthy family's house.
There was a movement to restore the dignity of the South by building mansions that looked stately. And they often had tall columns with Corinthian capitals, and they were painted white. And the architecture was, in a sense, a kind of propaganda.
So pivoting a little bit to more recent times, once homes started being mass-produced in the 20th century, did this start to see the disappearance of a lot of these Southern aesthetics in homes?
Yes, you could buy the same house in Mandio, North Carolina, the same shape, design, colors, roof shape, that you can buy in Montana. And so people have lost the notion that a house belongs to its particular place, largely because when you mass produce homes, that's the most economical, which is to say cheapest way to do it.
So, thanks to mass production and some architectural myths, a traditional Southern aesthetic is harder to come by in contemporary homes. But I wanted to get a little more specific. So I asked Frank, what about a North Carolina aesthetic? Is there even such a thing as a North Carolina home?
No. There are many kinds of homes in North Carolina.
And that makes sense. One of the wonderful things about our state is its eclectic geography. A house in the mountains is going to need a different design than one on the coast. But even without a state-specific brand of architecture, Frank says building a home in North Carolina can be an opportunity to live in harmony with our surroundings.
If you're of modest means, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. A farmer, when he built his farmhouse, had to use what he had very carefully. He and his family would use local materials. He knew which way the wind was blowing. He knew where the sun came from.
Frank is no farmer, But he took on a similar philosophy when he built his own house decades ago.
The house we're sitting in today. We didn't build a house for 2 years after we'd bought the lot. It was an empty lot.
Oh, wow.
Because we wanted to get to know what the neighborhood was like. If you can get to know the neighborhood and where the house is in it, or the countryside, try to find out as much as you can about that first, and then other things will fall into place.
Now, clearly, having the ability to be really intentional with a house can be hard to come by. It's challenging enough just trying to buy a home today, let alone designing it from scratch. I don't own a home, and many of us rent or live in apartments. But my conversation with Frank left me inspired to reclaim my living space in new, creative ways. Even if you didn't design your home yourself, just getting to know the land it occupies and working with it, not against it, can be a distinctly Southern act.
I think everyone deserves a good home, whether we get it or not. Not all of us get it, but we all deserve a good place to live where we feel comfortable, where we can open the windows and enjoy the fresh air, grow a tomato or two. I think it's a fundamental need to have a place that feels like our own, and for that place to be as nice as we want it to be.
If you'd like to see photos of Frank Harmon's beautiful home, check out this week's show notes. You'll also find a link there to the work of Jeremy Markovich at the North Carolina Rabbit Hole. This episode of The Broadside was produced by Charlie Shelton Ormond and our editor, Jared Walker. Our executive producer is Wilson Sayre. The Broadside is a production of WUNC North Carolina Public Radio and is part of the NPR network. You can email us at broadside@wunc.org. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a rating, a review, or share it with a friend. I'm Anissa Khalifa. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll be back next week.